Small Cap Power in Toronto. We're with Chris Berry, President of House Mountain Partners. Chris, thank you for joining us here on Small Cap Power.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so before we discuss lithium and cobalt, let's talk about the sentiment here and what you're experiencing as the day's moderator for all these panels going on.
You know, I think that everyone's still very optimistic about the potential for lithium and the potential for cobalt. You know, we had a lot of good audience questions in both panels. Interestingly enough, we just did a uranium panel, and I think it was probably the best of the three in terms of the content and the potential for the metal going forward. And what was interesting was it was probably the most poorly attended of the panels, and so that sort of tells me that, you know, we're probably at a bottom for the uranium market.
Let's talk about the cobalt panel, for example. You asked, you know, is this real to your panelists? Why do you think that was something that you should have hit right off the bat?
Because the cobalt price has increased by 144% in the last 18 months, and so, you know, when I look at this energy metals space, you know, over the last 5 to 10 to 15 years, anytime you see a parabolic rise in the price of one of these niche metals, it usually corrects and corrects hard. I do not see that happening with lithium and cobalt. I do feel like there's sort of a new normal that will ultimately prevail when supply and demand equilibrate, but I do think that both for cobalt and for lithium, it's going to be a very tight market out to 2020 or 2021. And so we're really in sort of the early stages of this cyclical move with these energy metals.
Well, one of the things that we all know is that China is the prominent leader in the industry. Are Americans and Canadians, basically North America in general, able to partner with them with ease, or is it more of a competitor type of thing?
It's never easy. You know, you're entering into sort of longer term contract and offtake negotiations. Chinese lithium processors further downstream have been very aggressive with respect to securing supply, typically from Western Australia. So you're going to see a lot more of that, and I think ultimately, rather than just strategic investors in China doing these deals, you're going to start to see automotive manufacturers start to say, hey, you know what, security of supply is a real issue, both with lithium and cobalt and perhaps some of these other metals, and so start to get in the game that way.
Got it. Now with the DRC, there's a lot of negative sentiment that is floating around. Do you think that's too far, legitimate? What's your thought?
I think it's legitimate. I mean, look, the DRC has been a challenging place to do business for a long, long time. I don't see that changing, but I think the paradox is that I see cobalt production from the DRC actually increasing over the next few years as opposed to decreasing. I just don't think that, you know, some of these other projects that are outside of the DRC are going to be able to come on stream on time to really alleviate the tight markets. So yeah,
Gotcha.
So I think that the DRC is going to remain a real force in the cobalt space.
Well, for you, what would you rather be investing if you had to choose one? Is it lithium or is it cobalt?
It's like I said, you're asking me to choose between which of my children I like more. I think it really depends, and I hate to sort of hedge on that. You know, lithium has had a great run for the last couple of years, and I think cobalt is a little bit further behind. So there's potentially a little bit more upside in the cobalt space, but I wouldn't turn either one of them away at this point in time.
Gotcha. So you don't think it's, you know, the opportunity has passed for retail investors to be in cobalt or lithium?
No. I see tight markets for both of these materials out to 2020. And here we are in late 2017. So you know, you do want to think about where you want to be on the supply chain, and that's an individual decision if you want to look at juniors or, you know, the large producers of lithium, for example, or even further down the supply chain, battery manufacturers, cathode manufacturers. You know, as people become more educated about this space, there are a lot of different ways to invest and you know, position going forward.
Right. Now, I love to ask this question to any of my interviewees, but if there is a mistake that you've made that in your career is very notable that you learned from, can you share it with our audience?
I don't have enough time to tell you about the mistakes.
Very humble.
Yes. No, look, I was probably too bullish during the last cycle, the last super cycle, across all of these metals and minerals. And I think that, you know, that certainly humbled me, but it also gave me an opportunity to really look at these niche metals and these niche markets and understand how they work and get a more sober view of the supply and demand dynamics going forward. And I'm still quite bullish on both cobalt and lithium because of it. But, you know, I think that confirmation bias and sort of getting swept up and whipped up with the crowd is a real challenge, and that's just human nature.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for your insight today, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.